那开场一样，喜欢我们直播的话可以点赞、订阅、开启小铃铛，然后来直播上面聊聊天哦。OK， 那就像我们刚刚说的嘛，接下来要打的是这个塔马尔乔治亚的女王的故事，所以我们要先来看一下乔治亚的历史文件。噔噔，在这里，哦呦，后来住的文明有一段特殊音乐，蛮好听的，所以有点吓到我。好，乔治亚人是中世纪早期高加索以南的地方有被很多小王国给瓜分，有一些地理的隔绝这样子。拜占庭虽然很想要统治他们，但是没有成功。然后后来慢慢的统一，在11世纪初合并成乔治亚王国。OK， 尽管局势紧张，但乔治亚跟拜占庭王国曾经是在赛尔柱土耳其人涌入的时候有一个共识，他们应该都是基督教的王国啦，是因为这样关系。那拜占庭因为在我们之前玩过了嘛，一个1071的曼奇克托战役里面惨败。哦，有没有？这个我们依照这个时间顺序玩的优点就来了，我们已经了解完曼奇克托战役了，那这时候来打这个乔治亚战役就会很有感觉这样子。OK。但乔治亚王国是屹立不摇的，没什么问题。虽然有一直被破坏这样子，其中有一个特别的乔治亚人是在拜占庭里面当指挥官的。OK， 那后来重建兴起了这个大卫四世，然后后来呢，乔治亚第一个女王塔马尔就是我们的这个战役的主角，延续。然后原本是从小王国变成可以参加十字军东征的强国，蛮厉害的。那中世纪的乔治亚为什么繁荣是归功于他人民的聪明才智跟韧性？哦，奇怪哦，因为熟悉山区的地形嘛，就可以建造这个防御工事，然后那进而会有很稳定的经济，像山中的城堡之类的。那乔治亚军队只是利用地形来阻挡敌人这样，所以防守才守得住这样子。OK， 那乔治亚军队由莫纳斯帕来领导，这个位阶仅次于国王或女王。OK， 那黄金时期却在13世纪突然就结束了，因为蒙古的勇进人高加索山脉，那乔治亚挡不住，就成为了附庸。虽然后期曾经短暂恢复，但是鼠疫就是黑死病席卷了这个地区，所以就经济或军事都会有很大程度的衰退。那后来铁木的军队又再次涌进了乔治亚。然后最后就在15世纪瓦解了，所以乔治亚这个文明也算是结束了，对，就是这个文明也走到尽头了，但是不是在我们这个塔马尔的战役里面，而是在后面的蒙古人的西征吧，还有黑死病，还有铁木尔。OK， 行，看完历史了，那我们来看一下科技树，就知道我们等一下玩什么。来了，乔治亚 ，OK， 乔治亚第一个是说，你盖完城镇中心送你一辆骡车，所以你不用盖伐木场，因为你就有移动的伐木场骡车，等一下会介绍，所以省资源乔治亚这边资源很省。第二点是，强化教堂会给村民采集、修理、建造的速度加 10%， 所以你之后可以在这个农田或者是说金矿，常见是在金矿处啦，金矿处跟农田处盖强化教堂，因为金矿会挖很久。然后单位跟建筑受到高地加成伤害减 15%， 就是假设说你今天站在低地吧，然后被高地打，一般会有个伤害加成，我记得是 25%， 那这边会减免，所以就会比较耐打这样子。第四个加成是说，骑兵单位会自动回血，那这边已经被削弱了，以前是回一个百分比，现在是回固定的这个血量，其实不多，还好。特殊单位莫纳斯帕，这个特殊的骑兵单位，人越多会越强，最多可以加到4。非常厉害。那这边没有写说数量是不是？每7个加1，所以28只就可以有加4的攻击，所以大概30只就很强了。好，所以我们等一下一定会玩莫纳斯帕，甚至莫纳斯帕就是我们的主力，应该不会再出别的，就是莫纳斯帕跟巨头这样子。特殊科技银冠塞凡塔，防御建筑的攻击力会加2，塔射出的弩箭可以穿透，所以你的防御箭塔会蛮厉害的。然后防御建筑的攻击力加2，我想不包括城堡。应该是限 TC 跟瞭望塔，就是箭塔这样子， 所以这个说真的要玩塔攻才厉害，我们不太玩塔攻，所以就还好。金冠骑兵单位的占用人口数减少，就是后期你可以爆出更多的骑兵，这样子蛮不错的，还行。那团队加成就是建筑物的维修费用会减少蛮多的，那是蛮厉害的。尤其在什么打4人团之类的啦，例如说遇到什么 TC 爆的战术之类的，但是在战役里面就比较不重要。OK， 我们来看一下军事建筑吧。射箭场基本上只能玩马弓，但是你的马弓还没有拇指环，稍微弱，但是可以玩啦。马弓、重装马弓、安息人都有，还行。没有强弩兵，所以那个步弓兵没有未来。军营是全满的哦。很 OK， 你要出，假设说对面出太多马了，你扛不住，你要出搓兵也可以，后期要玩剑勇也可以。可是，因为莫纳斯帕太香了，不太会玩到这里，顶多出搓兵吧，我觉得。马厩当然是该有都有，品种跑速，那大罗马也有。没有游侠的原因是因为也无所谓的原因是因为莫纳斯帕太强了，你不会出游侠，所以基本上马厩你只会出肉马，然后主要的军力是会是莫纳斯帕。工程器很猛啊，重冲、重头、重弩都有，唯一没有火炮，小可惜。但它工程器也是几乎很满的。那兵工厂的话，刚刚说了，你要打马或打这个步兵都可以，可是工兵没有3防，所以你的马弓对射会输。所以我觉得马弓真的还好，可能当做辅助吧。对面出太多搓兵的时候，你可以出一点马弓，但其实莫纳斯帕是甚至可以硬吃硬吃骑兵的啦，很强。那海军的话，还行啦，重型火弹船、重型弩炮弹船都有，可是没有船坞，没有造船员，对，后期可能也是不强，但是码头还可以打。僧侣没有赎罪，也有点影响。那骑士思想还好，僧侣还行，唯一缺的是赎罪思想。可是僧侣内战的话会有很大的影响，因为有没有赎罪思想会影响很多。有火枪有火枪，这代表着一件事情，你不用打马弓啊，你怕骑兵你出火枪就好了。那没有3级防你也很无所谓啊。哎呦，这种提醒我，这个乔治亚这句玩法应该是火枪配莫纳斯帕，不是马弓配莫纳斯帕。既然只是当一个辅助的话，你的科技升的少越少越好。那你打那个火枪兵只要升防就好了，不用升攻击力，所以更好。OK。这样大概知道怎么打了。行，那我们就来开始塔马尔的战役吧。Let's go， 一样是5关，那我也还没打过困难，那我们开始吧。第1关是接管。
You have me right where you want, Ogide Khan. After all of my unheard prayers, I now find myself kneeling before your bow. I should feel lucky to have survived this long. But the only thoughts that still cross my mind are of what could have been before the dreams of my kingdom were silenced by a rampage of butchery. It is cruel that you now ask me to humor you with a tale so captivating that you cannot loose your arrows into our chests. But for my own sake, and that of my advisors, I, Queen Rusudan of Georgia, will try. You Mongols look at my lavish garment and assume that we Georgians have never known hardship. But in truth, we come from beginnings as humble as any warlord without a battle to his name. Our kingdom sits at a crossroads between worlds, the Byzantine West and the Persianate East. For generations, we lived in the war-torn shadows of empires, competing on all sides of the mountains surrounding us. Under the leadership of my mother Tamar, however, Georgia would finally become an empire in its own right. Initially, Tamar was merely co-regent to her father, who hoped to ready his only child for when she inherited the throne. Turning to her great-grandfather David the Builder for inspiration, the young heir applied herself to the task, acquainting herself with every tedious detail that comes with ruling a kingdom. Yet, when her father died, she found herself cast into a political game for which nothing could have prepared her. Reeling from her father's authoritative reign, the Aznauri nobleman in her court deprived her of her powers before she could wield them. To achieve their ends, they forced her to marry a deposed Russian prince named Yuri, who vowed to keep her in check while the Aznauris continued to dilute the crown's authority. Facing resistance at every turn, Tamar had no choice but to travel to Armenia. There, she would seek the help of her only allies in the court, the brothers Zakarian.
行，所以这边是一个已经就刚刚历史文件有提到嘛，就是蒙古人后来就攻占了乔治亚王国，那时候开始讲以前的故事。OK， 任务是要占领尤里的纪念碑。那100人口没办法进到第一王时代，只能打城堡。OK， 塔马尔不是战士，他是领导者，他只能够补血，他是个骑马僧侣啦，我印象中是这样子。第3个是说，我们是有一个骡车，骡车就是采矿营地，也是伐木场，就看你放在哪里，它里面可以研发科技。就是采矿科技跟伐木科技，乔治亚村民可以在强化教堂附近效率更高，而且可以躲在里面来防守，蛮厉害的。乔治亚是石匠专家，就像我们刚刚说的那个修补会减25%，所以修什么都可以，修木头也是，修石头也是。那侦查这边是我们只有一点点的跟随者，要整顿国家。我们的丈夫黄色是统治的乔治亚，那被激怒的话会率领着军队过来，那因为他刚刚说是俄罗斯人嘛，所以是，等一下，叫斯拉夫人，斯拉夫的文明这样子。OK， 那，乔治亚是尤里统治的时候，是可以在橘色的地方找到那个塔马尔的盟友，包括这个伊万跟扎卡列跟扎卡利安。那我们受到强盗的侵扰，会有一些强盗。那阿兹诺青色占领了3个乔治亚城镇。我们可能打败阿兹诺就可以收复城镇，然后使用城镇的东西这样子。然后南部也很常受到塞尔柱土耳其的侵扰这样子，他们是会攻击这个没有军事单位的村民嘛，可是如果有强化教堂的话就还好。那最后是我们的是库曼人的家园，那这些库曼人可能会参战哦，他们是有这什么草原骑兵跟清查就马弓这样子。OK， 我们先看一下剧情，等一下就处理2个东西。
It is a relief to set foot where I feel wanted.
另外一个模组。
Indeed, Armenia is a pleasant place. You can tell by those shabby buildings. Let us ride out to meet with my brother Zakare and finally put an end to these dark times.
同意。
It is high time that we had a heart to heart.
Raised by the Cumans following his father's murder, Yuri was skilled in combat and a shrewd judge of character. It was not long before he earned the respect of the masses. The one person who vehemently disapproved of Yuri was Tamar herself, whose dysfunctional marriage left her in constant misery. When finally afforded the chance, she insisted that they be divorced. It was an unprecedented move for the already unprecedented queen, but for once, she had her way, and she knew exactly who should replace Yuri. From a young age, Tamar's eyes had been for David Soslan, an Alanian prince who had frequented her palace ever since her aunt began looking after him. Tall in stature and built like a fortress, my father was the fancy of every maiden in Georgia. Most importantly, however, he respected Tamar in a way Yuri never had, preferring to submit to her orders rather than give his own. After so many setbacks, and with her former husband now exiled to Constantinople, the young queen could at last envision a future where she would take the lead.
再来是第2关，尤里的复仇。
Opportunists lurk in the shadows of victory. Just as your father contended with a vengeful Kushluk, my mother now faced the wrath of those blindsided by Yuri's ousting. One evening, Tamar invited the Aznauris to dinner, only to notice that her drink was not quite the usual color. When she caught the smug look on her guests' faces, she knew exactly who was at fault. Her suspicions were soon confirmed when Yuri returned from exile and seized the stronghold of Gori. Hungry to overthrow the woman who had disgraced him, the deposed leader now spearheaded a resistance of vengeful Asnauris and new followers who he had met while in exile. Having only recently seized power, Tamara now had to hold it. In a tense showdown, the two former partners would decide their future, or lack thereof.
好，不要让别人占领的纪念碑，抵抗尤里的入侵。150人口，一样城堡而已。不可能有海军，好，没关系。建议是来点10万塔。我们会需要帮助扎卡利安兄弟摧毁敌人的城堡。哎呦，不错哦。好，我们来推城堡，可以。所以可能要用冲车，是不是？应该用冲车哦。我们守护着首都提比里斯。好，黄色就是尤里，来复仇。OK， 他认识了一些保加利亚人。OK， 没关系，我们的这个莫纳斯帕打保加利亚还是没什么问题的。还有一些乔治亚叛军，就是刚刚那个阿兹诺贵族啦，加入他们，青色，所以黄色、青色。那橘色、蓝色是我们的兄弟，我们的伙伴。然后这些人会派出，我们只怕戳啦，但还好。不控制他们的话会比较强哦。尽快把青色解决掉，是不是？行。还有一些拜占庭人，行，那我们就开始。
Yes, Tamar, I am back. Did you think that I would let another man take my rightful place?
看他是很像恐怖。
I should have realized the red like he would not give up so easy.
哎呦嘞 ，OK。
Forgive me. I have failed you.
It is over, Yumi. Now my reign will start in earnest.
When Tamar's guards brought Yuri before the queen, everyone in the room held their breath as she contemplated the fate of the man who had just brought her kingdom to the brink of collapse. As vengeful stares surrounded him, the once dauntless spirit suddenly broke down and burst into tears. Much like myself, Yuri looked into the face of death. But in that moment, something unexpected came over my mother, and she ordered her executioner to freeze his weapon before it could land. This act of mercy appalled many, yet Tamara stood firm. Such a ruthless demonstration, she said, was unworthy of a man who had battled her so valiantly, especially when only a stroke of luck had kept her from the same fate. Yuri was blessed with another chance. I can only pray that I am offered the same.
下一个，保护国。
Evidently, my story has not impressed you, and still you ask me for more. Perhaps you would not be teasing me with my advisor's corpse if I had chosen my words more carefully. Then again, regret was all but routine for my mother, whose responsibilities only continued to grow with time. If not for her new husband's support, she would have struggled to adapt to her newfound freedom. It was not long before the confidence that David installed in her proved crucial. The ruler of Shirvan, a Georgian protectorate, pled for her aid in his struggle for the city of Shamkor, which had just fallen to a Turkmen army. Though largely unacquainted with her Muslim vassal, Tamara knew that there was little time for detailed planning. She would need to act decisively while she still had an ally left to protect.
而且这个保护国还是这个穆斯林保护国，我们是基督教国家，蛮特别的。好，击败土库曼人， 那夺取旗帜就可以解放这个城市，扫荡建筑，掠夺资源哦，可以拆建筑物。可以叫帝王了，但100人不能生村民，没有火药。掠夺敌人的建筑物，好，或者贸易来累积资源，制高点很重要。好的，哦，是在高处会减免伤害啦，是这样子，原来如此。占领这个沙姆科尔，我要怎么是英文呢？好，但是不要拆相对旅馆，会了。可以研发阿兹诺骑兵哦，金冠阿兹诺骑兵的阿兹诺是这个阿兹诺贵族的阿兹诺。OK， 莫拉斯巴越多越强，好的，知道。我们有一群分队，然后蓝色在周边，这个青色是我们的盟友，只剩下一个小镇。要为他夺回沙姆科尔地区。哎，尤里又来了，受不了。但目前在处理自己的事情，所以应该不会出兵。前面不会吧？有驻军紫色，还有乡村绿色，可以掠夺绿色的资源。好，可以招降一些村民。好哦。哦，我有村民了。
The mighty city of Shankor is on the horizon, but we must pillage the countryside before we can take it.
结束了呢。
Even if you behave like a rabid dog, I will not strike you down like one. Forget the crown.
封建双 TT 就离谱，确实。
Our enemies have surrendered and Shirvan is restored. Victory is ours.
赢喽！
You may consider Tamar foolish for continually sparing her ungrateful former husband. But this steadfast kindness was her greatest quality. Despite suffering one betrayal after another, the queen remained remarkably composed. Many who once sought her demise now admired her integrity. Yuri, by contrast, now struck his former supporters as a desperate and delusional renegade. With his guise of righteousness shattered, all that remained was his vanity. Few mourned when he died in a Tbilisi monastery. Tamar, meanwhile, only grew more popular as she expanded her kingdom. For the queen treated her foreign subjects with dignity, rather than as lowly tributaries. Whenever the Turkmens attacked, the people of Shirvan could always count on the queen's protection. Ruthlessness can be a powerful tool, but greater still is the strength to put it aside.
那我们就继续前进，下一个是建国者塔马尔 ，Go。
Although peace reigned for a time, Tamar's recent victories had drawn the Rome Sultanate's ire. With war imminent, my mother thought back to David the Builder's defining moment. The Battle of Didgori was a watershed victory for Georgia, one which permanently established it as a force to be reckoned with. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered by the long invincible Seljuk forces, Tamar's great-grandfather led his hardy Monaspas in a decisive shock charge, one which even the victors of Manzikert could not withstand. Despite this, the Seljuks were only beaten, not vanquished. Now the haughty Sultan of Ram was eager to finally undo Didgori. He gleefully sent an emissary to Tamar, proposing that this feeble-minded woman marry him, or else be reduced to one of his concubines. When the ambassador delivered the letter to Tamar's court, an enraged Zakaria smacked the emissary in the face, sending him to the floor. Undeterred by the Sultan's insults, the queen wished to resolve the matter peacefully. But more pressing matters pulled her in another direction. Over the prior century, Armenia had fallen on hard times. Its key cities were now held by the Shaddadis, whose yoke the Zakarian brothers were eager to overthrow. Liberating Armenia would gain Tamar and her husband a valuable ally in the inevitable conflict against the Seljuks. With the fate of Georgia once again at stake, the queen would finally follow in her great-grandfather's footsteps.
OK， 看来是要跟土耳其人全面开战喽。我们要保护扎卡里安兄弟，也就是橘色，打败拉姆苏丹国。这个紫色虽然翻译有点怪怪的，150人口应该可以帝王，然后摧毁沙达德真中心就可以让他们移转。OK， 所以我们只要摧毁真中心就好了，拆了就跑，保护盟友。然后我的敌人会掠夺黄金，靠！过度投资经济之前要先建造防御。OK， 好哦。我们从东边开始，然后橘色在西边哦，我们的西边这样子。好，有蓝色，然后青色，青色会帮我们这样子，所以我们只要打蓝色就可以了。最后是紫色。那还有一个特殊的这个紫色的援军，一样都是这个穆斯林的绿色。然后君士坦丁堡，他妈的侄子亚历克塞耶，跟那个科穆林的姓是一样的吧？好，所以如果我们可以保护黄色的话也 OK。会了。
Many years ago, my great-grandfather David the Builder crushed the Ram Sultanate at the Battle of Didgori. It is my destiny to uphold his legacy.
Please, just go away. I promise never to bother you again.
A glorious victory for Georgia. David the Builder would be proud.
看一下结尾的剧情。
Tamar's victory over the Seljuks earned Georgia immense prestige. Like David the Builder before her, she wasted no time in making the most of it. Tamar promoted educational reform and built new churches and hospitals throughout her ever-expanding domains. She worked tirelessly to improve the lives of the common people, whom the Aznauris had long ignored. From the humble soldier to the eloquent poet, Tamar cherished every loyal follower who had contributed to her success. She transformed Georgia from a small backwater kingdom into a flourishing empire, whose influence stretched from the shores of the Caspian Sea to the highlands of Anatolia. Truly, it was an inspiring time to grow up. In my youth, I never could have foreseen that this realm would one day be laid waste. Yet, as my mother knew all too well, even the happiest of moments can swiftly be soured. One night, an advisor arrived with a message that would forever haunt her. Your husband is dead.
终于走到最后一关了，披着豹皮的女王，最后了 ，Go！
I was too distant from my father to be moved by his passing. But now, as I stare at the ghostly remains of my capital, I finally understand what my mother felt on that dreadful night. Even before the word spread, it was obvious that something had changed in the queen. Only seldom would she show her face in public, and when she did, her manner was terse and indifferent. Misfortune followed swiftly. The resurgent Turkmens devastated Zakari's capital of Ani, while Ivane was briefly imprisoned during one of his campaigns. Without David to soothe her, the widowed queen took to eating to cope with the stress. Doubt gnawed at her. Had she truly been this weak all along? Up until then, my mother had prevailed over sultans, emirs, and her own husband. Desperate to convince herself of something greater, she set her sight on a foe like none she had ever crossed. The Khwarazm Shah, I assume, needs little introduction. Your armies have become quite familiar with his former domains by now. By challenging her most dangerous neighbor, Tamar put all of Georgia at risk. As her health took a turn for the worse, she knew that the next day was no guarantee. Before her time came, she would embark on one final test of her abilities. Only I remain now. What few words I have left to say may be my very last. No matter what follows, you shall know the whole truth.
在最终战前要尽量完成更多的次要目标，然后只能60人口哈。一开始是不能够养村民的，我们要占领更多的波斯城市。我们现在攻击这个波斯嘛。第一个部分要尽量完成次要目标。好，我们拥有的每个城市都会生产资源，后面就需要生存了。波斯战象很难打，要用僧侣招。好，我的这个军队是不会参加最后战斗的。好，我们进入了波斯攻击花剌子模。凉啊！征服呼罗珊可以赢得指挥权，但是古尔帝国是骆驼加精锐古拉姆匈牙利轻骑兵，看他打谁咯，因为绿色是有骆驼啊，蛮好用的。蓝色有草原骑兵、雀靴跟重装马弓。最后是伊万跟扎卡列的亚美尼亚部队，虽然刚刚说已经被击败了这样子。OK， 那我们就是先看看怎么办吧，我也不知道。
Well, this is it. Either we achieve our greatest triumph, or we return on the brink of permanent ruin.
We must secure supplies from Persian cities to strengthen our position. The Shah is gathering his army as we speak, so there is no time to lose.
No, I must flee back.
搞定。
I will be safe.
We did it! The Shah's armies have crumbled. The kingdom of Georgia shall immortalize your name.
My body fails me with every passing moment. Bring me home to bid our beautiful kingdom a final farewell.
噔噔噔。
Have I finally evoked something in you? Is it your respect for my mother's victory against the Shah, the man whose defeat was the crowning jewel of your father's achievements, that makes you spare my life? Is that why you offer me the bow that moments ago was to kill me? For all the atrocities that you have wrought, it would be perverse of me to accept it. And yet, I will. My mother brought Georgia to heights previously unthinkable. She contended with the greats of her time and bested them all. She left behind a magnificent legacy. But for all my efforts, I have failed to preserve it. I'm not worthy of Tamar the Great, nor have I ever been. If submitting to your rule will save what is left of her kingdom, then I will accept your friendship. In return, I plead only that you accept this. Inscribed is a story of valor, adversity, and companionship. The Knight in the Panther's Skin is a tale inspired by my mother's life, one which raises our spirits to this day. When generations have passed, these stories will be all that we leave behind. Your father may well be renowned as the greatest conqueror of all time, whilst my mother becomes just another one of history's forgotten. However the next 1,000 years look back on us, may our fates be bound evermore.
所以这里的他讲的说，那个蒙古人的复兴指的就是成吉思汗吗？哇！ 感伤的结局，最后是接受了蒙古的统治啊，为了要让王国存续下去。OK， 这次应该是真的打得很干净了，已经全程救解完了，舒服。那我们就拿到了打完全部的塔马尔了，拿到了一个新的金勾勾在这里，噔噔噔噔。那今天直播到这边，谢谢大家。那一样喜欢我们直播的话，可以点赞、订阅、开启小铃铛，然后来直播上面聊天哦。大家赶快去吃饭吧，拜拜。